The morning sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted storefront of Maya's Artisan Coffee as I adjusted the chalkboard sign one final time. My hands trembled slightly as I wrote, "Grand opening today," in careful cursive, the chalk dust mixing with the rich scent of espresso and sawdust that had become my daily perfume over the past 6 months of grueling renovations. Each letter felt like a promise I was making to myself, to the community, to the dream that had consumed every waking moment for the past 4 years. I stepped back to admire the storefront that had consumed my life savings, my sleep, and most of my relationships. The rustic brick facade gleamed under a fresh coat of sealant that I had applied myself at 5 a.m. 2 days ago, working by streetlight to get the perfect finish. The hand-carved wooden sign I'd commissioned from Marcus, a local woodworker who'd become a friend during the planning process, hung perfectly centered above the door. It had cost me $300 I could barely afford, but seeing Maya's Artisan Coffee, carved in elegant script, made every penny worth it. Through the spotless windows, glass I'd cleaned and re-cleaned obsessively for the past week, customers would see exposed beam ceilings that had taken 2 weeks to strip and refinish, reclaimed wood tables I'd sanded and stained myself during countless late nights when my back ached and my hands were raw with splinters, and the crown jewel, a restored 1970s Fama espresso machine I'd found at an estate sale in Grand Rapids. The elderly woman selling it had tears in her eyes as she explained it had belonged to her late husband's coffee shop. I'd paid $800 for it, nearly a month's worth of groceries at the time, then spent 3 months learning to rebuild it through YouTube tutorials, forum discussions, and pure determination. My phone buzzed against my hip. 7:45 a.m. 15 minutes before the official grand opening that I'd been planning since I first sketched business ideas on napkins during my breaks at Starbucks. I scanned the empty sidewalk that stretched in both directions like a concrete desert under the early morning sky. No familiar faces gathering with cameras and congratulations flowers. No proud relatives forming an excited crowd outside my dream come true. No dad's weathered Chevy pickup truck with the dented tailgate, or mom's silver Toyota Camry that she'd driven for 12 years. In the parking spaces I'd mentally reserved for family since I first sent out the grand opening invitations 3 weeks ago. The silence was deafening in a way that made my chest tight with disappointment. I'd imagined this moment so differently during the sleepless nights of the past month. In my dreams, there was a small crowd of family and friends gathering before opening time. Dad taking photos with his ancient digital camera, Mom fussing over my appearance and making sure I had eaten breakfast, Kevin rolling up with a few of his friends to show support for his little sister's crazy coffee shop idea. Instead, I stood alone on the sidewalk, watching early commuters hurry past with their heads buried in phones, completely oblivious to what this moment meant to me. Sarah Chen, my business partner and former college roommate, emerged from inside carrying a spray bottle and microfiber cloth, her black hair pulled back in the messy bun that had become her signature look during renovation season. She'd been my rock through this entire journey, investing not just her graphic design skills and a modest financial contribution when the banks turned me down for the 3rd time, but countless hours helping me sand tables, paint walls, and perfect the color scheme that now made the interior feel warm and inviting. Her design eye had transformed my utilitarian vision into something that actually looked like a place people would want to spend time. "They'll show up," she whispered, but I caught the doubt flickering in her dark eyes as she polished an already spotless window for what had to be the 5th time this morning. "Maybe they're just running late. You know how your dad is with time. Always thinks 5 minutes late is basically on time." I wanted to believe her with every fiber of my being. God, how desperately I wanted to believe that Dad would come screeching into the parking lot at the last minute with his usual dramatic flair, apologizing for some minor crisis that had delayed him, that Mom would appear around the corner with her digital camera and that proud smile she'd worn when I graduated college, that my brother Kevin would roll up on his black Kawasaki motorcycle with a group of his friends ready to celebrate my achievement and order enough coffee to make my first day sales numbers look respectable. But the street remained stubbornly empty, except for Mrs. Peterson from 2 blocks over walking Goldie, her ancient golden retriever who moved at approximately the speed of molasses, and a brown UPS truck idling outside Henderson's Hardware, while the driver checked addresses on packages. The morning air carried the usual downtown sounds: distant traffic from the main highway, the rumble of the early bus route, the faint hum of the bakery's industrial ovens 3 blocks away preparing for their own morning rush. The red ribbon I'd hung across the entrance yesterday evening fluttered in the gentle morning breeze, its cheerful color somehow mocking the growing knot in my stomach that had been building since I woke up at 5 a.m. I'd chosen red because it was traditional, festive, the color of grand openings and new beginnings, and all the optimism I'd been carrying for 4 years. Now it felt garish and presumptuous, like I was throwing myself a party that nobody wanted to attend. I'd imagined this moment so differently during all those late nights, when I lay in my tiny studio apartment above the hardware store, staring at the ceiling and planning every detail of opening day. In my mind, there was applause when I cut the ribbon, maybe even a small crowd of supporters cheering as I officially opened the doors to my future. Local customers who'd been following the renovation progress, friends from college who'd driven in for the occasion, neighboring business owners offering solidarity and welcome to the downtown district. Instead, I faced the very real possibility of cutting the ribbon alone while strangers watched through their car windows, probably wondering why some woman was talking to herself on the sidewalk at 8 a.m. Sarah handed me the ceremonial scissors, oversized gold-plated things I'd bought online specifically for this moment of triumph. They'd cost $49 that I probably should have spent on inventory, but something about having proper ribbon-cutting scissors had felt important to the ritual of it all. "Maya Rodriguez," she announced to the empty street, her voice echoing off the brick buildings that line downtown Riverside's slowly revitalizing historic district. "Congratulations on following your dreams and opening the coffee shop this community desperately needed." Her words carried more weight than she probably intended, because they were absolutely true. This community did need a real coffee shop. For too long, locals had been stuck with gas station coffee from the Marathon station on Route 9, or the Dunkin' Donuts 15 minutes away in the strip mall by the highway, or the corporate chain coffee place in the Walmart that had opened 2 years ago and somehow made even their simplest drinks taste like disappointment. I'd done extensive market research, conducted surveys at the farmers market and the library and the post office, identified a genuine gap in the market for specialty coffee served in a space where people could actually sit and talk and feel like part of a community. But market research couldn't fill the emotional void of celebrating alone. All those surveys and feasibility studies and financial projections couldn't touch the hollow feeling in my chest as I realized that the people whose approval I'd been chasing for 28 years simply weren't going to show up for the most important moment of my professional life. I raised the scissors, feeling ridiculous and heartbroken and proud all at the same time. The morning light caught the metal blades, sending a brief flash of reflected sunshine across the storefront window. The ribbon fell in 2 pieces, each half dancing in the breeze before settling on the sidewalk like discarded dreams. Sarah clapped enthusiastically, her applause unnaturally loud in the morning quiet that surrounded us. A jogger in bright blue athletic wear slowed down to watch, offering a thumbs up and a genuine smile before continuing his route down Maple Street. It wasn't the grand opening I'd envisioned, but it was done. "Beautiful job," called a voice from behind me. I turned to see Mrs. Henderson approaching from the direction of her flower shop 3 doors down, clutching a $5 bill in one hand and wearing the kind of apologetic smile that somehow made everything feel a little less lonely. Eleanor Henderson had owned Henderson's Flowers for 37 years, had watched downtown Riverside go through cycles of decline and attempted revitalization, had seen businesses come and go with the regularity of seasons. If anyone understood the courage it took to open a small business in a struggling downtown area, it was her. "Heard through the grapevine that you make the best lattes in 3 counties, she said, her voice carrying the warm authority of someone who'd been part of this community longer than I'd been alive. Figured I should be your first official customer and see if the rumors are true." I wanted to hug her. The relief of having a real customer, someone who'd chosen to be here, someone who was treating this like the significant moment it was supposed to be, nearly brought tears to my eyes. Instead, I channeled all my nervous energy into crafting the most perfect lavender honey latte of my career, grinding the beans with precise timing, steaming the milk to exactly 150 degrees, creating latte art with the kind of careful attention that comes from desperation to prove your worth to anyone willing to witness it. The familiar ritual of coffee preparation helped steady my hands and calm the emotional storm that had been swirling in my chest since I woke up to radio silence from my family. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, the result of 4 years working at Starbucks and countless hours practicing on the refurbished machine during the renovation process. Mrs. Henderson watched with genuine interest, asking questions about my coffee sourcing. I'd found a supplier in Michigan who worked directly with small farms in Guatemala, and complimenting the shop's interior design with the kind of specific observations that showed she was actually paying attention. "You've created something special here," she said, taking her first sip and closing her eyes appreciatively in the way that only true coffee lovers do. "This is exactly what Riverside needed. Don't you worry about opening day nerves. Word will spread fast about quality like this. I've been in downtown retail long enough to recognize the real thing when I taste it." By 9 a.m., I'd served 6 customers. By 10 a.m., the number had climbed to 12. By noon, I'd served maybe 20 people total. Each one a complete stranger who'd wandered in out of curiosity, been pleasantly surprised by the quality, and left with promises to return and bring friends. The morning crowd included Jim Morrison, not the deceased rock star, but the retired librarian who still came downtown every day to read newspapers and chat with shop owners, who ordered a simple black coffee and spent 20 minutes telling me about the history of our building. A young mother named Lisa, with twin toddlers who desperately needed caffeine and a place to sit down, ordered 2 large lattes and let her kids color on the paper placemats I'd had printed with simple line drawings. There was Margaret Chen, no relation to Sarah despite the shared last name, who worked remotely for a marketing company in Grand Rapids and immediately claimed the corner table with the best Wi-Fi signal and laptop-friendly lighting. She ordered a cortado and a blueberry muffin from the local bakery that I'd partnered with, then spent 2 hours on video calls while periodically complimenting my coffee between meetings. By the time she left, she'd already asked about purchasing a punch card for regular visits. A group of 3 retirees, Frank, Donald, and Carl, arrived together around 10:30, ordered Americanos, and settled in for what appeared to be their regular morning discussion of local politics, sports, and whatever drama was unfolding at the senior center. They stayed for nearly 2 hours, ordering refills and creating exactly the kind of community atmosphere I'd envisioned when I first started planning this space. The cash register showed a respectable first-day take, not enough to pay all my monthly expenses, but enough to prove that the concept could work, that there was genuine demand for what I was offering. But the emotional ledger remained painfully unbalanced. Every time the door chimes rang, I looked up hopefully, expecting to see Dad's familiar bulk or Mom's careful smile, or Kevin's deliberately casual entrance. Each time, it was another stranger, which was good for business, but devastating for my heart. I kept checking my phone obsessively, hoping for messages I increasingly knew wouldn't come. The group text chat with my family that usually buzzed constantly with Kevin's memes, Mom's neighborhood gossip, and Dad's forwarded political articles had been silent for 3 days. My last message, "Grand opening tomorrow. Can't wait to see everyone. First round of coffee is on me," hung there unacknowledged, its cheerful exclamation points now looking desperately naive in the harsh light of reality. I'd sent individual texts, too. To Mom, "Hope to see you tomorrow morning. Saved your favorite table by the window." To Dad, "Opening at 8 a.m. sharp. Would love to have you cut the ribbon with me." To Kevin, "Finally ready to show you what I've been working on. Bring friends. I need the customers." All delivered, none read, according to the message indicators that had become a source of obsessive checking. Sarah handled the afternoon shift while I retreated upstairs to my apartment above the shop, needing a few minutes to process the strange mixture of business success and personal disappointment that was defining my opening day. Living above your business wasn't glamorous. The space was basically a glorified studio apartment with a tiny kitchenette and a bathroom that required careful coordination between shower use and coffee shop operation. But it kept overhead low and allowed me to hear every customer interaction through the thin floors that hadn't been properly soundproofed during the building's conversion. I'd furnished the small space with secondhand finds from estate sales and Facebook Marketplace, creating a cozy haven that smelled perpetually of coffee beans and the fresh paint I'd used to cover the previous tenant's questionable decorating choices. A futon that converted to my bed, a small dining table that doubled as my desk, built-in shelves lined with business books and coffee guides, and a window that looked out over the alley behind the shop where delivery trucks made their morning rounds. The leftover grand opening cupcakes from Grandma Betty's bakery sat untouched on my kitchen counter, their cheerful yellow frosting and, Congratulations, Maya, decorations, now feeling like a monument to misplaced optimism. I'd ordered 24, figuring I'd share them with family and friends who came to celebrate, maybe give them away to early customers as a grand opening bonus. Instead, they sat there mocking me with their celebratory message written in purple icing that was starting to look a little sad around the edges. Wilted congratulations flowers from the Riverside Chamber of Commerce drooped in a mason jar that had originally held local honey, their once bright petals browning at the edges like my enthusiasm. The card was signed by Patricia Williams, the chamber president who'd been encouraging local entrepreneurs and trying to revitalize the downtown district for 15 years with mixed success. I collapsed onto my futon, still wearing the dress I'd bought specifically for this day. A cheerful sundress in the same shade of green as my shop's logo, purchased from Target, with money I should have probably saved for business expenses. The silence upstairs felt oppressive after the gentle buzz of customer conversation below. Through the floorboards, I could hear Sarah's laughter mixing with unfamiliar voices, the pleasant clink of ceramic mugs being set down on wooden tables, the hiss of the espresso machine working exactly as it was supposed to. My phone sat on the coffee table. Really just a storage ottoman I'd found at Goodwill, like a small black rectangle of disappointment. I picked it up, scrolled through the family group chat one more time, considered sending another message, then set it back down. How many times could you reach out to people who clearly didn't want to respond without crossing the line from hopeful into pathetic? My mind wandered to all the conversations I'd had with family members over the past year about the coffee shop. Dad's initial reaction when I told him about my business plan. Coffee shop? Maya, those things fail faster than restaurants. Why don't you get a real job with benefits instead of chasing pipe dreams? Mom's more diplomatically worded concerns about the risks of small business ownership, delivered with the kind of loving worry that somehow felt more crushing than outright opposition. Kevin's casual dismissal. Cool, sis. Let me know when you're ready to hire me as manager, delivered while scrolling through his phone, and clearly not listening to the details I'd been excited to share. None of them had asked to see my business plan, despite the countless hours I'd spent perfecting it. None of them had visited during the renovation process, despite my invitations to see the progress and help with painting or cleaning. None of them had shared my grand opening announcement on social media, despite my careful posts designed to be easily shareable. The absence of support hadn't been dramatic or hostile, just a consistent lack of interest that I'd kept hoping would transform into pride once they saw what I was building. My phone finally buzzed at 6:47 p.m., just as I was considering whether leftover cupcake constituted a balanced dinner, and trying to motivate myself to go back downstairs to help Sarah with the evening cleanup. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and for one brilliant moment, my heart lifted with desperate hope. Maybe he was calling to apologize for missing the opening, to explain some family emergency that had kept everyone away, to ask how the day had gone and express regret for not being there. The message that appeared on my lock screen crushed those hopes more thoroughly than complete silence would have. Heard about your little coffee shop venture through the grapevine. Since you're clearly making money now, it's time to step up for family. Kevin needs $15,000 for his business opportunity. Cryptocurrency consulting. Real future potential in that market. Family sticks together, Maya. Time to show what success really means. I stared at those words until they blurred, reading them over and over as if repetition might somehow change their meaning or reveal some hidden layer of congratulations that I'd missed on first reading. Little coffee shop venture. As if 4 years of planning and saving, 6 months of backbreaking renovation, and the most important day of my professional life could be summarized as a little venture that existed primarily to generate income for Kevin's latest scheme. 4 years of saving every tip from my barista job at Starbucks, working double shifts while my college friends went to parties and spring break trips and internships that didn't pay but offered valuable experience. 2 years of business plan revisions, market research, and bank meetings where loan officers looked at my carefully prepared financial projections and shook their heads with the kind of sympathetic disappointment reserved for naive dreamers. 6 months of renovations that I'd done largely myself to save money, learning plumbing and electrical work through YouTube videos while accumulating a collection of cuts, burns, bruises, and splinters that told the story of sweat equity transformed into reality. And this was his response. Not, "Congratulations on following your dreams," Not, "Sorry we missed the opening, but we're proud of you for building something real." Not even, "How did the first day go?" Just immediate demands wrapped in guilt, and the casual assumption that my success existed primarily to fund Kevin's latest get-rich-quick scheme that would inevitably fail like all the others, leaving me financially damaged and him ready to move on to the next opportunity that required family investment. I typed and deleted a dozen different responses, my emotions cycling between hurt and anger and disbelief that this was really happening. Congratulations would have been nice first, felt too passive-aggressive, and would probably trigger a lecture about family priorities. Where were you today when I needed you? Sounded too needy, and would be dismissed as emotional manipulation. Kevin needs to get a real job like the rest of us. Would only activate Dad's protective instincts and result in a phone call about my selfishness and ingratitude. Finally, I settled on something that bought me time while avoiding direct confrontation. Let's talk about this in person. Can we meet this weekend to discuss everything? Neutral, non-committal, giving me a chance to process this impossible request and figure out how to navigate the minefield without destroying what little family connection remained. His response came within minutes, as if he'd been waiting by his phone for my compliance. Saturday afternoon works. Come to the house around 2 p.m. Bring your checkbook. We can get this handled quickly and get Kevin started on his consulting business. The casual assumption that I'd comply, that the only question was logistics rather than whether I'd actually give Kevin $15,000, made my jaw clench with frustration. No discussion, no negotiation, no acknowledgement that this might be a significant financial decision that required careful consideration. Just the expectation that little Maya would fall in line like she always had, prioritizing family financial needs over her own business security and growth plans. If your family ignored your biggest achievement, then immediately hit you up for money. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how many of us had to celebrate our success alone before being asked to fund everyone else's dreams. That night, sleep came in fragments interrupted by anxiety and the occasional creak of settling wood from the building below. I'd always been a light sleeper, but living above the shop meant becoming intimately familiar with every sound the century-old building made as it cooled and settled in the night air. The old radiator pipes clanged like angry ghosts whenever the heating system kicked on. The vintage espresso machine made occasional settling noises that sounded like alien communication. Streetlights filtered through the thin curtains I'd hung for privacy, painting everything in orange-tinged shadows that made my small space feel both cozy and lonely. I found myself replaying the day's interactions, searching for validation in the smiles and compliments of strangers while nursing the sting of family absence that felt like a constant bruise on my heart. Mrs. Henderson's genuine enthusiasm when she tasted her latte and pronounced it the best coffee she'd had in years. The remote worker Margaret, who'd complimented not just my coffee, but the peaceful atmosphere I'd created, saying it was exactly what she'd been looking for in a workspace. The teenage couple who'd taken selfies with their matching lavender lattes and posted them on Instagram with my shop's hashtag and hearts emojis, generating my first social media mentions from actual customers. These small victories should have been enough to carry me through the emotional disappointment of family absence. In any rational analysis, the day had been a genuine success. I'd served good coffee to happy customers, earned positive word of mouth that would bring people back, taken the first steps toward building the sustainable business I'd been planning for years. But rationality couldn't fill the emotional void left by the people who should have been there and weren't, who should have been proud and were instead already calculating how to benefit from my success. Dad's message glowed in my mind like an unexploded bomb. Kevin needs $15,000. The number felt both arbitrary and impossibly massive, more than my optimistic monthly revenue target for the first 6 months of operation. More than half of my carefully hoarded emergency fund that represented the only thing standing between success and failure if the business hit unexpected challenges. Money I'd already earmarked for equipment upgrades, additional inventory, and the part-time employee I desperately needed but couldn't yet afford. I tried to imagine Kevin's latest business plan, though experience suggested it would follow the familiar pattern of grand vision, minimal planning, and inevitable failure that had characterized all his previous ventures. There had been the food truck business that never got past the permit stage because Kevin discovered that commercial kitchen licensing was more complicated than it should be. the lawn care service that folded after one summer because he realized he genuinely hated yard work and couldn't motivate himself to wake up early enough for morning appointments. The brief attempt at becoming a personal trainer that ended when he got bored with his own workout routine and stopped showing up at the gym where he'd convinced them to let him train clients. Cryptocurrency consulting sounded impressively modern and potentially lucrative. But what actual qualifications did Kevin have beyond watching YouTube videos about blockchain technology and losing $300 on Dogecoin during its brief surge in popularity? Dad's message had been carefully crafted to emphasize real future potential, without mentioning any actual credentials, business plan, or track record of success in financial services. Classic Kevin. All vision and enthusiasm. Zero execution or follow-through. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of coffee grinding, customer service, and growing dread about Saturday's inevitable family confrontation. Each day brought more customers than the last, as word spread through Riverside's tight-knit downtown community about the new coffee shop that was actually worth visiting. Mrs. Henderson had apparently become an unofficial ambassador, sending friends and regular customers my way with enthusiastic recommendations. The morning regulars started claiming favorite tables and developing relationships with each other that turned my shop into the kind of community gathering space I'd envisioned. Margaret Chen had become my first official regular customer, arriving every morning at 8:15 with her laptop and staying until noon, ordering multiple drinks and creating a steady stream of remote work energy that attracted other laptop users. A local book club asked about reserving space for their Thursday evening meetings, offering to buy coffee and pastries for all members in exchange for exclusive use of the back corner for 2 hours. A food blogger named Jessica Romano, with 30,000 Instagram followers, stopped by Wednesday afternoon and spent an hour photographing her lavender latte from multiple angles with professional lighting equipment, promising a feature post that could reach thousands of potential customers. Sarah handled the growing social media response, while I focused on perfecting recipes and streamlining operations that were scaling faster than I'd anticipated. We made a surprisingly effective team. Her marketing background and design eye complemented my hospitality experience and obsessive attention to coffee quality. Her calm professionalism balanced my tendency toward perfectionist anxiety about every detail being exactly right. She joined the venture as much for friendship as profit, investing her savings and countless hours of unpaid labor to help me achieve a dream we'd discussed during late-night conversations throughout college. "You realize you're allowed to enjoy this success, right?" she said Thursday morning, watching me obsessively clean an already spotless espresso machine for the 3rd time since opening. "The shop is thriving. Customers are coming back and bringing friends. You've created something genuinely special here. You can be happy about that without needing family approval." Her words hit harder than she'd probably intended, forcing me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. Was I really so dependent on family validation that I couldn't celebrate genuine achievement? The evidence suggested yes, despite every business metric indicating success beyond my most optimistic projections. I felt hollow and anxious, as if the whole enterprise might collapse without parental blessing and familial pride. "I know you're right," I said, but my voice lacked the conviction that would make the statement true. "It's just, they've never supported anything I've wanted to do. College was expensive and unnecessary until I proved I could get scholarships. My barista job was wasting my potential, even though it taught me everything I know about coffee service. Moving out of their house was abandoning family, even though I was 24 years old. I thought maybe building something real, something profitable that serves the community, would finally earn their respect." Sarah's expression softened with the kind of understanding that comes from witnessing family dynamics over years of friendship. She'd been present for enough holiday visits and family phone calls to understand the complex web of expectation, guilt, and conditional approval that had shaped my relationship with my relatives since childhood. "Maybe their respect isn't worth earning," she said gently, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe you're trying to prove yourself to people who aren't capable of seeing your value, who view your achievements as resources to be managed rather than accomplishments to be celebrated." Friday brought an unexpected rush that kept me too busy for existential contemplation about family relationships and emotional validation. Jessica Romano's Instagram post had gone viral within the local coffee community, generating more than 2,000 likes and dozens of comments from people planning visits to Riverside specifically to try my lavender honey latte. By 2 p.m., we had a line stretching halfway down the block, with customers happily waiting 20 minutes for their orders, while taking selfies and adding to the social media buzz that was building organically around my little shop. I called Jessica Martinez, the part-time barista candidate I'd interviewed 2 weeks ago, and asked if she could start immediately instead of waiting until the following Monday as originally planned. Within an hour, she was behind the counter learning my systems and helping manage the overwhelming demand that was both thrilling and terrifying. Watching her work reminded me why I'd chosen her from a pool of 8 applicants. She had genuine enthusiasm for coffee culture, natural customer service instincts that couldn't be taught, and the kind of calm efficiency under pressure that suggested she'd thrive in the fast-paced environment I was trying to create. "This is absolutely insane," Jessica said during a brief lull around 4 p.m., gesturing toward the crowd that was still gathered outside despite the line moving efficiently. "Maya, how long has your shop been open? A week?" When I told her it was only day 4, her eyes widened with the kind of amazement reserved for unexpected miracles. "You're going to need more help than just me and Sarah. Have you thought about hiring a second part-timer? This level of demand isn't sustainable with just 3 people." The question struck me as both practical and surreal. 4 days ago, I'd been worried about having enough customers to pay the bills and justify my investment. Now I was facing the pleasant problem of success that exceeded my wildest projections, requiring expansion planning that I hadn't expected to need for at least 6 months. Saturday morning brought nervous energy that I channeled into deep cleaning projects and obsessive inventory management that definitely didn't need my personal attention. Jessica handled the breakfast rush with competence that freed me to focus on details that were probably unnecessary, but gave me something to do with my hands, while my brain churned through scenarios for the afternoon's family confrontation. The coffee grinder settings that were already perfectly calibrated, the milk steamer temperature that hadn't varied by more than 2 degrees all week, the angle of the menu chalkboard that customers could clearly read from any position in the shop. Busy work designed to avoid thinking about the conversation that was approaching like a storm front on the horizon. "You're being weird," Sarah observed around 11 a.m., finding me reorganizing the pastry display case for what had to be the 4th time since opening. "Weirder than usual, I mean. And that's saying something. What's really going on?" I filled her in on Dad's text message and the family meeting I'd agreed to attend, describing the pattern of family financial expectations that had shaped my entire adult relationship with money, success, and personal boundaries. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing progressively more concerned as I detailed years of financial transfers, guilt-based manipulation, and the casual assumption that my achievements existed primarily to benefit Kevin's various failed ventures. "Let me get this straight," she said, when I finished explaining the situation. "They didn't show up for your grand opening. Not one of them bothered to attend the most important day of your professional life. And now, 4 days later, they want $15,000 for Kevin's cryptocurrency consulting business that he's not qualified to run?" Hearing the situation summarized by someone outside the family system made the absurdity impossible to ignore. Sarah's voice carried the incredulous tone of someone encountering this dynamic from the outside, without years of conditioning that had normalized emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. "Family helps family," I said, automatically repeating Dad's favorite phrase before catching myself and recognizing how hollow it sounded. "I mean, that's how they see it. Kevin's struggling, and I'm finally doing well, so you become Kevin's personal ATM?" Sarah shook her head with disgust. "Maya, you worked yourself to exhaustion to build this place. You saved for years, took enormous financial risks, put everything on the line to follow your dream. And now that it's paying off, they want to redirect your profits to fund someone else's half-baked scheme." When she framed it that way, the expectation sounded even more unreasonable than it had in my own mind. But family dynamics don't follow logical rules. They operate on guilt, obligation, and ingrained patterns of behavior that resist rational analysis and seem to exist in a separate universe from normal relationship boundaries. "I don't know how to say no without destroying what's left of our relationship," I admitted, voicing the fear that had been keeping me awake at night. "They already think I'm stuck up for going to college instead of getting married young like Mom did. If I refuse to help Kevin when I finally have money, that'll just confirm their opinion that education ruined me and made me selfish." Sarah's laugh held no humor whatsoever. Education didn't ruin you, Maya. It gave you the tools to see how toxic this dynamic actually is. And refusing to fund Kevin's fantasy business isn't selfish. It's financially responsible. The drive to my family's house took 15 minutes through neighborhoods I'd known my entire life, past landmarks that carried layers of childhood memories and teenage resentment. Tree-lined streets gradually gave way to the suburban development where I'd grown up, where every yard looked essentially identical, and conformity to middle-class expectations was treated as the highest virtue. Ranch houses with attached garages, driveways filled with practical vehicles, lawns maintained to neighborhood association standards that discouraged individual expression. Dad's house sat at the end of Maple Street, its brown vinyl siding and beige trim blending seamlessly with the aesthetic of planned mediocrity that had characterized my childhood environment. The small front yard was precisely edged, the mailbox painted to match the house trim, the decorative shutters serving no functional purpose beyond suburban aesthetic compliance. Kevin's black Kawasaki motorcycle sat in the driveway next to Dad's pickup truck, both vehicles showing the wear and tear of owners who viewed regular maintenance as optional rather than essential. Mom's silver Toyota Camry was conspicuously missing from its usual spot, probably running errands at the grocery store or visiting her sister across town. Anything to avoid the family meeting she knew would turn unpleasant once money became the primary topic of conversation. Dad answered the door before I could knock, his expression already set in the disappointed scowl I remembered from childhood lectures about ungrateful attitudes, insufficient appreciation for family sacrifices, and the importance of putting family needs ahead of personal desires. At 62, he still carried himself like the factory supervisor he'd been for 30 years before the plant closed and eliminated his position along with 400 others. He was accustomed to giving orders and expecting immediate compliance, uncomfortable with discussions that resembled negotiations rather than decree announcements. "About time you showed up," he said, stepping aside to let me enter while checking his watch with exaggerated precision. "Kevin's been waiting for over an hour." The living room hadn't changed significantly since my high school graduation 8 years ago. Same brown leather couch that had dominated the space for as long as I could remember. Same wooden coffee table covered with sports magazines and remote controls for various electronic devices. Same massive television mounted on the wall like an electronic shrine to passive entertainment. The familiarity was comforting and oppressive simultaneously, representing both childhood security and the limitations I'd worked so hard to escape. Kevin sprawled on the couch in his usual position, game controller in hand, eyes fixed on whatever first-person shooter was consuming his current attention span. At 26, he still lived in the basement bedroom he'd occupied since high school, contributing minimal rent money from sporadic employment and treating the house like a hotel with free meals and laundry service. His dark hair was longer than it had been during his brief attempt at employment with a local landscaping company, his stubble suggesting several days without shaving, his clothes carrying the rumpled appearance of someone whose schedule didn't require professional presentation. He looked up from his game long enough to offer a half-hearted wave in my direction. "Hey there, sis. Heard your little coffee thing is really taking off downtown. Pretty cool that it's actually working out." His tone carried the subtle dismissiveness he'd always used when discussing my achievements, as if success was something that happened to me by fortunate accident, rather than through careful planning, sustained effort, and significant financial risk. Little coffee thing. 4 years of business development reduced to a casual hobby that had unexpectedly generated income. "It's going better than I expected," I said carefully, taking the armchair Dad had indicated with a gesture that brooked no negotiation about seating arrangements. "The community response has been really positive." Dad settled into his leather recliner, the throne from which he'd delivered family pronouncements and financial decisions for as long as I could remember. The chair had been his Christmas gift to himself 5 years ago, purchased despite Mom's objections about the expense, and positioned to provide optimal viewing angles for both the television and the window overlooking the front yard, where he could monitor neighborhood activities. "That's good to hear," he said, with the kind of satisfaction that suggested my business success validated his own judgment about family potential. "Means you can afford to help your brother get started on his own entrepreneurial venture. Kevin's got a real opportunity here, Maya. Cryptocurrency consulting is the future of financial services. People are making serious money in that market." Kevin paused his game and launched into what sounded like a carefully rehearsed pitch, probably practiced in the basement while waiting for my arrival. blockchain technology revolutionizing traditional banking. Digital asset management becoming essential for modern investment portfolios. Consultation fees for helping clients navigate the complicated cryptocurrency market that was intimidating average investors. His enthusiasm was genuine and infectious, but his knowledge seemed limited to buzzwords and success stories he'd absorbed from YouTube videos and online forums. Sounds interesting, I said neutrally, trying to keep skepticism out of my voice. What's your background in financial consulting or investment management? I've been studying this stuff intensively for the past 6 months, Kevin said, as if half a year of internet research qualified him to handle other people's investment decisions and retirement planning. I understand the market trends, the hot coins, the strategies that actually work long-term. I just need startup capital for marketing materials and office space to meet with clients professionally. $15,000 for marketing materials and office space. I thought about my own business development journey, months of market research conducted through surveys and focus groups, detailed financial projections reviewed by 3 different accountants, a business plan that I'd revised 17 times before approaching banks for funding, the permits and licenses and insurance policies, and health department inspections that had consumed weeks of paperwork and bureaucratic navigation. Have you written a formal business plan? I asked, genuinely curious about the level of preparation he'd done. Researched the legal requirements for financial consulting? Looked into licensing and liability insurance requirements? Kevin's expression shifted from enthusiasm to irritation, the same look he'd worn throughout childhood whenever adults asked questions that suggested his ideas needed additional development. Why does everything have to be so complicated with you, Maya? Dad's right. College made you overthink every simple opportunity. This is straightforward business. I help people make money with cryptocurrency investments. They pay me a percentage of their profits. Easy money for everyone involved. Simple opportunity. Easy money. The exact phrases that had preceded every one of Kevin's failed business ventures over the past 8 years. Dad nodded approvingly, as if Kevin had delivered a masterful presentation that addressed all potential concerns, rather than revealing his complete lack of preparation for the legal and practical realities of investment consulting. Kevin's got natural instincts for this kind of work, Dad said with conviction born of parental bias rather than objective evaluation. He doesn't need a fancy college degree to recognize good opportunities when he sees them. What he needs is family support to get started, and that's where you come in. Family support. The phrase that had justified years of financial transfers from my bank account to Kevin's various schemes, always framed as temporary assistance that would be repaid once his ventures became profitable. Support that consistently flowed in only one direction, with no expectation of repayment and no acknowledgement when projects inevitably collapsed under the weight of inadequate planning, and Kevin's tendency to lose interest once initial enthusiasm wore off. Dad, I just opened my business 4 days ago, I said carefully, trying to maintain diplomatic tone while establishing basic facts about my financial situation. Every dollar I have is either reinvested in inventory and equipment or set aside for emergency expenses. I really can't afford to make major loans right now. Loans? Dad's voice sharpened with the kind of indignation reserved for suggestions that family financial arrangements should include formal terms or repayment expectations. Maya, this isn't a loan request. This is family helping family achieve success. Kevin supported you when you were getting your business started. When did Kevin support my business? I asked, genuinely confused about what specific assistance he was referring to. What kind of support did he provide during my planning and renovation process? He didn't complain when you monopolized my time with all your construction questions and permit problems, Kevin said without looking up from his game controller, as if his silence about my renovation projects constituted significant contribution to their success. I could have used help with my own projects during that time, but I stepped back and let Dad focus on your coffee shop stuff. The revisionist history was breathtaking in its audacity. Dad had visited my construction site exactly twice during the entire 6-month renovation process, both times to criticize my paint color choices and suggest that I was wasting money on unnecessary upgrades that customers wouldn't appreciate. Kevin's projects during that same period had consisted entirely of watching YouTube videos about cryptocurrency while complaining that traditional employment was beneath his entrepreneurial spirit and creative potential. I appreciate that Kevin didn't interfere with my renovation work, I said, choosing diplomatic language over accurate historical accounting. But I'm still not in a financial position to invest in other business ventures right now. Invest? Dad's voice rose with familiar frustration that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse about obvious family obligations. Maya, you're making money hand over fist down there. Don't tell me you can't spare $15,000 to help your brother get his consulting business off the ground. That's just selfishness. Plain and simple. Selfishness. The word that had haunted my childhood, applied to every instance of prioritizing my own needs over Kevin's desires, or expressing reluctance to share resources that I'd earned through my own efforts. Selfish for wanting to join the high school debate team instead of working extra shifts at the grocery store to help fund Kevin's car insurance. Selfish for choosing a college major based on my intellectual interests rather than potential earning capacity that could benefit the family. Selfish for moving out of the family home instead of staying to help with Kevin's various financial needs. This isn't about selfishness, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady and reasonable. It's about financial responsibility and business sustainability. I have employees to pay, rent and loan payments to make, equipment maintenance costs, insurance premiums. I can't risk my business's survival to fund startup ventures. Kevin finally looked up from his game, his expression shifting from casual dismissiveness to something that looked like genuine hurt and betrayal. Risk your business survival? Maya, we're talking about helping family, not some stranger off the street. This isn't charity. It's an investment in your brother's future. Investment in Kevin's future. The same language that had been used to justify every previous financial transfer, despite the fact that none of those investments had generated returns or even been acknowledged once the ventures failed, and Kevin moved on to new opportunities that required fresh capital injections. Kevin, I understand this opportunity feels important to you, I said, trying to strike a balance between family diplomacy and financial reality. But $15,000 represents a significant portion of my business emergency fund. Without adequate reserves, one slow month or unexpected expense could force me to close. One slow month? Kevin laughed with genuine disbelief. Maya, you've got lines around the block after 4 days of operation. You're not exactly struggling to make ends meet. Lines around the block that could disappear as quickly as they'd appeared if customer enthusiasm waned or a competitor opened nearby. Kevin's confidence in my continued success was touching, but demonstrated complete ignorance about the volatility and challenges of small business ownership. Dad leaned forward in his recliner, employing the stern father voice that had commanded immediate obedience throughout my childhood. Maya, your brother needs this opportunity, and you're the only person in the family who can provide it. You've always been the responsible one, the successful one. It's time to share that success with family members who need help getting their own lives on track. Share success. As if success was a finite resource that could be distributed equally among family members, rather than something earned through specific choices, sustained effort, and willingness to accept significant personal and financial risk. I'm not trying to hold Kevin back, I said, feeling the familiar pressure to justify my position, even though it was completely reasonable. I'm just not in a position to fund other people's business ventures right now. Maybe if he could start smaller, build some experience and track record before requiring major capital investment. Start smaller? Kevin's voice cracked with indignation and wounded pride. Maya, you don't understand how cryptocurrency markets work. This is an industry that moves incredibly fast. By the time I start smaller and build a track record, all the best opportunities will be gone and the market will be saturated with consultants who got in early. Market timing. The classic excuse for why every investment opportunity required immediate action without time for due diligence, proper planning, or gradual development. Why careful research was the enemy of profit, and why family funding was the only logical source for time-sensitive ventures that couldn't wait for traditional business loans or investors who might ask inconvenient questions. If the opportunity is genuinely solid, it'll still be available after you've done proper preparation and planning, I said, trying to inject some reality into the conversation. Maybe you could take some courses in financial planning, get relevant certifications, build relationships with established investment advisors who could mentor you. Dad stood up abruptly, his body language signaling that the discussion phase was over and compliance was now expected. Maya, I'm disappointed in you. Your brother comes to family for help with a legitimate business opportunity, and you're giving him lectures about courses and certifications. Sometimes you need to take risks and trust family instead of overthinking everything. Trust family. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad was asking me to trust Kevin with $15,000 based solely on genetic relationship and enthusiastic projection, while showing no trust in my business judgment, financial planning, or concerns about cash flow management. I need some time to think about this, I said, standing up to signal my intention to leave before the conversation escalated into territory that would damage relationships beyond repair. Can I give you an answer next week? Next week? Kevin threw his controller onto the coffee table with dramatic flourish. Maya, I've got potential clients lined up for consultations. People who are ready to invest significant money in cryptocurrency portfolios. If I don't have startup capital to get my business launched properly, I'll lose everything before I even get started. Lose everything. The dramatic language Kevin always employed when discussing his projects, as if the entire family's future depended on funding his latest idea. Never mind that he'd never invested anything tangible in the venture beyond YouTube research time and basement-based business planning sessions. I understand the timing feels urgent, I said, trying to balance family sensitivity with practical reality. But this is a significant financial decision for me. I need to review my cash flow projections and make sure I can afford it without jeopardizing my business operations. Dad's expression hardened into the cold disappointment I remembered from childhood arguments about responsibility, gratitude, and family loyalty. Fine, but don't take too long with your reviews and projections. Kevin's window of opportunity won't stay open forever, and family should be able to count on family when it matters most. The drive home left my hands shaking and my head spinning with the emotional whiplash of family manipulation disguised as reasonable requests. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd feared. Family loyalty weaponized against business sense, emotional manipulation disguised as financial opportunity, guilt trips presented as valid arguments for why my success should fund Kevin's fantasies. But underneath the familiar guilt and anxiety, a small flame of anger was burning brighter with each replay of the conversation. The casual dismissal of my concerns, the assumption that my money was available for family use without serious discussion or negotiation, the complete absence of interest in my business challenges, employee responsibilities, or financial constraints. Sarah was waiting when I returned to the shop, handling the afternoon coffee rush with the kind of competence that made my chest tight with gratitude. Real support looked like this, showing up without being asked, contributing skills and effort without expectation of dramatic recognition, celebrating successes, and sharing burdens because the relationship itself was valuable. "How did it go?" she asked during a brief lull between customers, though my expression probably answered the question before I could speak. "About exactly as I expected," I said, filling her in on the conversation's highlights, while we restocked pastry displays and cleaned espresso equipment that didn't really need our attention. Dad's disappointed that I'm not immediately writing a check. Kevin's hurt that I'm prioritizing financial responsibility over family loyalty. I'm the selfish sister who refuses to help family achieve their dreams. "And you're considering giving them the money anyway," Sarah observed, reading my conflicted expression with the accuracy that comes from years of friendship. "I don't know," I admitted, voicing the thought that had been circling through my brain during the entire drive home. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe family should come first, even if the business plan seems questionable. Sarah's expression sharpened with concern that bordered on alarm. "Maya, giving in to financial extortion doesn't make you generous. It establishes the price of your compliance and guarantees that they'll be back for more money whenever Kevin's next venture requires funding." Financial extortion. The phrase reframed the entire interaction, removing it from the realm of family relationships and placing it squarely in the category of manipulative behavior that shouldn't be tolerated regardless of genetic connection. "But if I refuse, I might lose them completely," I said, articulating the fear that had been keeping me awake at night. "They already think I'm uppity for going to college and starting a business instead of settling down with appropriate life choices. If I refuse to help Kevin when I finally have money, that might be the final straw." "Maya, what exactly would you be losing?" Sarah asked pointedly. "They didn't show up for your grand opening. They haven't expressed pride in your achievement or interest in your business challenges. They've never asked about your plans or offered non-financial support. What kind of relationship are you trying to preserve? What kind of relationship was I trying to preserve? The question hit with uncomfortable clarity. A relationship based on obligation, rather than mutual affection. A connection maintained through guilt, rather than genuine enjoyment of each other's company. Family ties that required constant sacrifice of my interests to maintain their approval. That evening, I sat in my apartment above the shop, reviewing financial spreadsheets and trying to imagine scenarios where giving Kevin $15,000 wouldn't devastate my business projections. The numbers told a clear story. I was profitable after 4 days, but nowhere near wealthy, successful but not financially secure. Equipment replacement fund for when the espresso machine inevitably needed repairs. Marketing budget for building customer base beyond the initial curiosity surge. Emergency fund for slow months or unexpected expenses. Employee wages and benefits for Jessica and the additional staff I'd need to hire if growth continued. Insurance premiums and license renewals and all the ongoing costs of business operation that Kevin's request completely ignored. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Dad mentioned you're thinking about Kevin's business proposal. Hope you'll do the right thing for family, sweetie. We've always been so proud of your success and want to see you use it to help the people who love you most. The right thing for family. Phrased to suggest that refusing Kevin's request would be morally wrong, rather than financially prudent. We've always been so proud, the past tense suggesting that future pride depended on my compliance with financial expectations. I stared at the message for several minutes before typing back, still reviewing my finances and business projections. This is a big decision that requires careful consideration. Her response came within minutes. Family shouldn't require business projections, Maya. Love means taking leaps of faith for the people who matter most. Kevin is counting on you to believe in his dreams the way we've always believed in yours. Love means taking leaps of faith, the way they'd always believed in my dreams, except when they'd describe my college education as expensive and unnecessary, my business plan as risky and impractical, my grand opening as too minor to attend. Sunday brought brief respite from family drama in the form of unexpected business success that reminded me why I'd taken these risks in the first place. A group of cycling enthusiasts discovered the shop during their weekly 20-mile ride, ordering complicated drinks with multiple modifications, and settling in for extended recovery time that turned into enthusiastic recommendations to their cycling club friends. Word continued spreading through social media networks and local community groups. The food blogger's feature post had been shared by other regional influencers, creating a cascade of positive attention that translated into steady customer traffic throughout the weekend. I found myself making hiring decisions I hadn't expected to face for months, calling Marcus Rodriguez, a college business student who'd submitted an application the previous week. "You're serious about starting immediately?" Marcus asked when I called Sunday evening to offer him a part-time position. "I thought you said you wouldn't be hiring until at least September." "Plans change when you're successful," I said, enjoying the novelty of solving problems caused by achievement rather than failure. "Can you start Tuesday morning for training?" Monday morning brought Dad's follow-up call, arriving with the punctuality of a scheduled obligation rather than the spontaneity of genuine family concern. I answered while prepping for the breakfast rush, balancing the phone between ear and shoulder while grinding coffee beans and arranging pastries with practiced efficiency. "Have you made a decision about Kevin's business proposal?" he asked without preamble, his tone suggesting that extended consideration was unreasonable delay rather than prudent financial planning. "I'm still reviewing my cash flow projections and business expenses," I said, buying more time while I searched for courage to have the conversation I'd been avoiding. "Dad, can I ask you something? Why didn't anyone come to my grand opening?" The silence that followed was long enough to make me wonder if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the defensive irritation of someone who'd been asked to explain behavior that he didn't consider problematic. "We were busy that day, Maya. Opening a coffee shop isn't exactly a major life event that requires family attendance. We figured you'd understand that we had other priorities." Not a major life event. 4 years of planning and preparation, months of renovation and preparation. The culmination of dreams I'd been nurturing since college. Dismissed as a minor business opening that didn't warrant family presence or acknowledgement. "It was a major life event for me," I said quietly, allowing some of my hurt to color my voice. "I really needed you there for support and encouragement." "Come on, Maya. You're a grown woman with a successful business that's apparently making money hand over fist. You don't need Daddy and Mommy holding your hand anymore. His laugh carried no warmth or affection. Besides, Kevin was going through a rough patch that week. Our attention was focused on helping him work through some personal challenges. Kevin's rough patch. The perpetual state that had justified years of family emotional and financial resources being redirected away from my achievements and toward his ongoing struggles with employment, relationships, and personal responsibility. I understand that Kevin needed support, I said, trying to maintain diplomatic tone. But I needed support too. Starting a business is terrifying and overwhelming, and having family there would have meant everything to me. Support isn't just about showing up with cameras and flowers, Dad said, his voice growing sharper with impatience. Real support means helping when it actually matters. Kevin needs financial assistance to get his consulting business off the ground. That's where you can make a genuine difference in family success. Real support equals financial support. Everything else, emotional encouragement, physical presence, celebration of achievement, was apparently superficial theater compared to the substance of check writing and resource transfer. Dad, I honestly can't afford to give Kevin $15,000 right now, I said, finally voicing the truth I'd been avoiding. My business is growing, but I'm not at the point where I can make major financial loans without risking everything I've built. Financial loans? His tone sharpened with the indignation reserved for suggestions that family arrangements should include formal terms or repayment expectations. Maya, this isn't a business transaction. This is family helping family achieve success and prosperity together. Family helping family, except the help only flowed in one direction, from my bank account to Kevin's ventures, with no reciprocal assistance for my business challenges or acknowledgement of my financial constraints. What specifically has Kevin done to help my business succeed? I asked, genuinely curious about Dad's answer. He didn't stand in your way when you were monopolizing family time with all your construction questions and permit problems, Dad said, as if Kevin's passive non-interference qualified as significant contribution. He could have complained about the attention you were getting, but instead, he stepped back and supported your project indirectly. Kevin's contribution to my business success had been staying in the basement playing video games, while I worked 16-hour days to transform my dreams into reality. I appreciate that Kevin didn't interfere with my renovation work, I said diplomatically. But that's not the same as providing support that creates obligations for future financial assistance. Obligations? Dad's voice rose with familiar anger. Maya, we're talking about family loyalty and mutual support, not legal obligations and business contracts. If you can't understand the difference, then maybe success really has changed you for the worse. The call ended abruptly with Dad hanging up before I could respond to his accusation that business success had corrupted my family values and personal character. I stood there holding the phone, feeling the familiar mixture of guilt and anger that characterized most of our conversations about money and family responsibility. But this time, the anger was stronger than the guilt, stronger than the childhood conditioning that equated family harmony with my compliance to financial demands, stronger than the fear of being labeled selfish for prioritizing my business security over Kevin's speculative ventures. 3 days later, everything changed in a way that would force the family conflict into the open and reveal the true depth of their commitment to my failure. I was closing up shop Wednesday evening when red and blue lights began flashing through the front windows, painting the interior in alternating colors that made my heart skip with immediate anxiety. 2 police officers stood outside when I unlocked the door, their professional demeanor and serious expressions suggesting this wasn't a routine check-in or community outreach visit. The taller officer, whose badge read Martinez, consulted a small notebook, while his partner stood slightly behind with the watchful posture of someone prepared for unpredictable situations. "Evening, ma'am," Officer Martinez said, his tone polite but formal. "Are you Maya Rodriguez, the owner of this establishment?" "Yes," I said, my voice coming out smaller than intended. "Is there some kind of problem? We received a welfare check request from your father, Stephen Rodriguez. He expressed concern that you've changed the locks on your residence, haven't been returning family phone calls, and might be experiencing some kind of mental health crisis related to business stress." Welfare check request. Dad had called the police to perform a wellness evaluation because I hadn't immediately agreed to fund Kevin's cryptocurrency consulting venture. The manipulation had escalated from guilt trips to involving law enforcement in family financial disputes. "I'm fine," I said, stepping back to let them enter the shop, while my mind reeled with the implications of Dad's decision to involve police. No mental health crisis, no dangerous behavior, just busy with my new business. The officers looked around the clearly organized and well-maintained shop, noting the clean surfaces, properly functioning equipment, and general atmosphere of successful business operation. The shorter officer, whose nameplate read Johnson, paused near the menu board and cash register, obviously seeing nothing that suggested mental instability or personal crisis. "Business looks like it's doing well," Officer Johnson observed, his tone shifting from official concern to casual conversation. "How long have you been open?" "Just over a week," I said, feeling some of my anxiety ease as their body language relaxed. "It's been busy, but that's a good problem to have. Your father mentioned that you've been acting unusually and refusing family contact," Officer Martinez said, consulting his notes again. "He seemed genuinely worried about your well-being and asked us to check on your living situation." Acting unusually by not immediately providing $15,000 for Kevin's business venture. Refusing family contact by asking for time to consider a major financial decision. Dad had reframed normal boundary setting as evidence of mental instability requiring police intervention. "I've been in regular contact with my family," I said carefully, not wanting to escalate the situation by criticizing Dad's motives. "We've had some disagreements about business and financial matters, but nothing that constitutes a mental health emergency. Mind if we take a look at your living space upstairs?" Officer Johnson asked, "just to complete the welfare check and put your father's mind at ease." I led them upstairs to my small apartment, which clearly showed no signs of instability, hoarding, or dangerous living conditions. Clean kitchen, organized living space, comfortable bed, adequate food and personal care supplies. Everything that would reassure concerned relatives about my physical and mental well-being. "Everything looks normal here," Officer Martinez said after a brief walkthrough that confirmed I was living in safe, sanitary conditions without obvious signs of distress. No indication of crisis or immediate danger. "Are you experiencing any thoughts of harming yourself or others?" Officer Johnson asked, completing the standard welfare check protocol with questions designed to identify genuine mental health emergencies. "No," I said firmly. "I'm dealing with family pressure about financial decisions, but I'm not in crisis or danger." The officers exchanged glances that suggested they'd encountered similar situations before. Family members using police resources to address personal disputes rather than genuine safety concerns. "Well, you're clearly doing fine," Officer Martinez said, closing his notebook with the satisfied efficiency of completing routine paperwork. "Mind if we ask what kind of financial disagreements are causing your father concern?" I gave them a simplified version of the situation. Family requests for business funding that I was considering carefully, leading to frustration about my decision timeline and accusations that I was being unusually distant or secretive. "Ah," Officer Johnson said with understanding born of experience. "Family money disputes. Those can get pretty heated. Your father probably thought involving us would pressure you to engage with whatever he's asking for. Family money disputes that had escalated to law enforcement involvement because I hadn't immediately complied with financial demands." The officer's casual recognition of the dynamic suggested that weaponizing police welfare checks for family pressure was more common than I'd realized. "We'll let your father know that you're safe and doing well," Officer Martinez said as they prepared to leave. "Might want to have a conversation about using appropriate channels for family disagreements rather than emergency services." After they left, I sat in my apartment trying to process the reality that Dad had involved police in our financial dispute. The escalation felt both shocking and somehow inevitable. When guilt trips failed to produce immediate compliance, he'd moved to more dramatic tactics designed to force engagement with his demands. My phone rang within an hour, Dad's contact photo appearing with the predictability of a scheduled appointment. I let it go to voicemail, then played back his message. "Maya, the officers said you're doing fine, but they mentioned you seem stressed about family financial matters. This is exactly what I was worried about. You're letting business pressure affect your relationships with people who care about you. Call me back so we can resolve this situation properly." Business pressure affecting relationships with people who care about me. Dad was reframing his own escalation to police involvement as concern about my well-being, rather than acknowledging that family pressure was the source of stress he'd identified. I didn't call back. Instead, I did something that felt both necessary and terrifying. I changed my phone number. The decision felt dramatic and final, but also liberating in ways I hadn't expected. No more guilt-laden text messages about family obligations and financial responsibility. No more calls that began with accusations and ended with manipulation. No more constant pressure to justify my business decisions to people who viewed my success as their resource to manage. I gave the new number to Sarah, Jessica, Marcus, and my business contacts. I updated my shop's official contact information and social media profiles. I informed my lawyer and accountant, and the few professional relationships that actually mattered for my business operations. I didn't give the new number to any family members. The silence that followed was both peaceful and unsettling. For the first time in my adult life, my phone wasn't buzzing with family drama, guilt trips, or financial requests. The quiet felt earned rather than lonely, like the first deep breath after holding it for years. 2 weeks later, everything escalated in a way that would transform family manipulation into criminal activity with serious legal consequences. I arrived at the shop Monday morning to find an official notice taped to my door. The county health department was ordering immediate closure pending investigation of anonymous complaints about food safety violations. My hands shook as I read the detailed allegations. Improper food storage temperatures that I checked and logged every 4 hours. Unlicensed food handling by staff when both Jessica and I held current ServSafe certifications prominently displayed behind the counter. Potential tax irregularities and unreported cash transactions that suggested money laundering through family financial transfers. Each allegation was precisely crafted to create maximum investigation time and business disruption. Someone with detailed knowledge of food service regulations and tax compliance had filed complaints specific enough to trigger mandatory closure while investigation proceeded. I called my lawyer immediately, explaining the situation, while health department inspectors photographed my equipment and sealed food preparation areas with official tape. Sarah arrived within 30 minutes, followed by several neighboring business owners who'd heard about the closure and came to offer support. "This is harassment," Sarah said after reading through the complaint details. "Maya, these allegations are ridiculously specific and completely false. Someone with inside knowledge of your business operations filed reports designed to shut you down. Harassment disguised as anonymous concern for public safety. The timing wasn't coincidental. Health department investigation following my refusal to fund Kevin's business venture and my decision to change phone numbers to avoid family pressure. That evening brought the confirmation I'd been dreading. A text message from an unknown number. "Heard about your health department troubles through the grapevine. These investigations can destroy businesses permanently if they find problems. Maybe it's time to reconsider what's really important. Family support might matter more than you realize. Dad. Maybe it's time to reconsider what's really important." Dad's casual knowledge of health department investigations that had happened less than 8 hours earlier, combined with veiled threats about permanent business destruction and reminders about family support obligations. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to my lawyer. The timing and content created a clear pattern of retaliation for my refusal to provide financial assistance, escalated to regulatory harassment when emotional manipulation failed to produce compliance. 3 days later, I received news that the investigation was being expedited due to evidence suggesting bad faith reporting. We've found information indicating that the anonymous complaints were filed by someone with detailed knowledge of your family financial relationships and business operations, the lead inspector explained. This appears to be malicious reporting rather than legitimate safety concerns. Malicious reporting filed by someone with inside knowledge of family relationships and business operations. Federal crimes that carried serious penalties for anyone who weaponized government resources against legitimate businesses for personal rather than public safety reasons. The shop was cleared and allowed to reopen within the week, but not before local media picked up the story of false complaints targeting a successful small business. The coverage generated community support that exceeded anything I could have achieved through normal marketing. Customers lined up around the block on reopening day, treating their coffee purchases as acts of solidarity against regulatory harassment. "This is what real community support looks like," Mrs. Henderson said, ordering her usual latte while surrounded by neighbors who'd come to show solidarity. "When someone tries to destroy a good business, people rally to protect it." Real community support that contrasted sharply with family manipulation disguised as concern. The people who showed up when I needed help versus the people who created problems when I refused to provide money. A month later, Dad was arrested on federal charges including fraudulent reporting, regulatory harassment, and conspiracy to damage a business through false government complaints. Local news covered the arrest extensively, framing the story as a cautionary tale about family conflicts escalating into federal crimes. The criminal case proceeded efficiently through federal court. Dad pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges in exchange for a sentence that included prison time, substantial fines, and restitution for my legal expenses and lost business revenue. Kevin faced related charges for his role in the harassment campaign, but accepted a plea deal for lesser charges that required community service and financial restitution while avoiding prison time. Mom maintained support for Dad throughout the legal process, choosing loyalty to criminal activity over acknowledgement of the harm it had caused. Her final phone call to me came before Dad's sentencing. "I know you're angry, but family should forgive and move forward together." Family should forgive and move forward together. The same principle that had enabled years of boundary violations and financial exploitation, now being applied to criminal behavior that had nearly destroyed my business. "Mom, criminal activity has consequences," I said clearly. "Family relationships don't create immunity from legal accountability." That conversation ended our relationship as well. She chose to support criminal harassment rather than acknowledging the legitimate harm it had caused to my business and livelihood. 6 months after Dad's sentencing, I celebrated the first anniversary of Maya's Artisan Coffee with a community festival that drew hundreds of people to downtown Riverside. Local bands performed, food trucks offered complimentary options, and children ran through crowds while parents relaxed with drinks and conversations. "Look around," Sarah said, gesturing toward the celebration. "This is your real family. People who choose to be here because they value what you've built. Real family based on choice rather than genetics, support rather than obligation, celebration rather than exploitation." The anniversary crowd included Jessica and Marcus, who'd become assistant managers and invested in long-term success. Mrs. Henderson and neighboring business owners, who'd provided practical assistance during crisis. Customers who'd become friends through shared appreciation for community gathering space. As the festival continued into evening, I found myself standing behind the coffee cart we'd set up outside, watching people enjoy the space I'd created while reflecting on everything that had changed since my lonely grand opening. A year ago, I'd cut that ribbon alone while family members remained absent from the most important moment of my professional life. Tonight, I was surrounded by hundreds of people who'd chosen to celebrate with me, not because of genetic obligation, but because they genuinely valued what I'd built. The empty grand opening that had felt like devastating failure had actually cleared space for authentic relationships to develop. Sometimes the best celebrations are the ones you build yourself, one authentic connection at a time, with people who choose to show up when you need them most. 2 years later, Maya's Artisan Coffee had expanded to 3 locations, employing 22 people and serving as a recognized model for community-centered business development. Each milestone came without family fanfare, but with genuine support from customers who'd become friends and colleagues who'd become chosen family. If your family treated your success as their resource instead of your achievement, share this story. Real support celebrates your vision without calculating personal benefit. Sometimes the best family is the one you choose, rather than the one you inherit, built through coffee and conversation, rather than obligation and guilt.